Thank you, Diana, for beautiful music as always. I'd like to point out that my family's here in the second row. My father is here, and the place is not burned down. So I guess he's not such a sinful guy as he likes to joke. My mother's also here, and her eyes almost popped out when Sarah mentioned that I'm an atheist. Well, I'm out of the closet now, and here, Mom, that's okay, actually. I want to talk to you about a very interesting experience I had. Before I get into that, I'd just like to mention that, during the joys and sorrows, I'm always so profoundly reminded how it's not our business dealings or what TV shows we like that connect us as people. It's the connection you feel when you hear that someone's loved one has died or someone has been born to a family. And that unity is one of the underlying themes of what I'd like to get into. If you look at the little picture I made for the cover of the Order of Service, you'll see a brick wall with a face in it. That is the face of a man who was originally named Inigo Lopez, but who is most famously known as Saint Ignatius of Loyola. He developed a spiritual program that I went through at my job at the University of Detroit Mercy, which is a Catholic university. And I thought you'd be interested to know how an atheist like me went through that experience. Everything I'd like to say would take hours, so I'm really going to have to try and run through and just give you little bits and pieces. This was an extremely rich experience. I want to talk about my beliefs, how they've changed a lot over my life, and how my beliefs today connected with this Catholic vision, specifically the Jesuit Catholic vision. And I'll give you some of the themes in the exercises. Also, I realized driving here today, I'm really going to be talking about three kinds of spirituality. One is atheism. If that's a kind of spirituality, I don't know, that's debatable. But the other, obviously, is Christianity, specifically Jesuit Catholicism. And the other is what I call a pure materialism, or a pure mechanistic view of the universe. Okay, so Ignatius Loyola was born in Spain, in the Basque country of Spain, in the 1491, and his most well-known activity was in the 1500s. He was a courtier, meaning he was a page at court, and he lived in that life on the fringes of royalty and all that goes with that. And he became a soldier and wore his sword around, and he was very proud of his position in society. He dreamed of marrying royalty and winning glory in battle. Well, in one battle, he got his legs blown up. And when he was convalescing, they didn't have any of the romance novels, not today's romance novels, but the kind of romance novels they had back then, which were the ones that Don Quixote would have read about knights gallant going around and saving damsels and unseeming people from belt to stern and stuff like that. But they didn't have any books like that. So the story is his sister gave him a book about the saints in the life of Jesus. And his experience of seeing his worldly ambitions become hollow and his admiration of the saints and of Jesus grow formed not only the actions of his life, the arc of his life, but also the arc of the spiritual exercises, which is his way of trying to write out how you go through that process. He founded the Society of Jesus, more well known as the Jesuits, And in the U.S., there's 28 Jesuit universities and colleges and lots of high schools and elementary schools all across the country, and there's Jesuit schools across the world. One day, my wife Lisa found a want ad down there they needed a web developer at the University of Detroit Mercy, and so that's how I ended up at a Catholic university. By this time, I was pretty confident in that I didn't believe in any kind of Bible God. In fact, I was in my 20s the first time I ever saw someone with the ashes on their forehead from Ash Wednesday. That's how little I knew about Catholicism. It was only till very recently that I realized that a movable feast had nothing to do with Tupperware. But let me give you a little bit of background on where I came from so that you have a better sense of how these two worldviews engaged. When I grew up, my mom had us go to Sunday school. I remember that. I remember when I was a young adolescent, she had me join a youth group at the local Methodist church, which seemed to me primarily to be a choir practice. But so it wasn't entirely unchurched growing up, but we never went regularly. I never felt any kind of connection to a personal God that I would pray to and who would answer my prayers. That was just completely foreign to what I felt was real. As a young adult, I realized that nature, the more I looked at it, the more it blew my mind. The cosmos, the variety of life on Earth, the complexity. And that really stimulated in me a sense of the magic, the mystical in the world. At that time, it led to things like wondering about, are there souls that continue through multiple lives? Is ESP possible? Is there, things like that? Can you actually bend spoons with your mind? Ultimately, that was all very unsatisfying. And then I started to look to science. And I found that more than anywhere, the more I read science, whether it was physics or chemistry or sociology or psychology, I got more answers there. Things made sense when I looked to science. And the more I looked, the more I realized, man, they can explain everything here. This tells how everything works. Just a few years ago, while I was working at the university, I read the capstone volume on this exploration, which was a 1976 book called The Selfish Gene by a man named Richard Dawkins. And this book blew the top of my skull off. By the end of chapter 2, I was like, that's it. That explains everything, down to the first replicating molecule, the source of all life. Doesn't matter if it's on this planet or any other planet. This is the explanation. I now have everything I need to know about why existence is the way it is. Physics explains the universe. Darwinian evolution explains all life. Psychology and sociology explain people and societies. So at that moment, I was a very confident atheist. I had zero need for any, supernatural deity to be doing anything. And more than that, more than being an atheist, I became a pure materialist. There was no meaning in the universe. It just was. It followed the rules of physics, from subatomic particles up to our behavior, and it's all explicable, and there's still a lot to know, but everything we learn from this point is only going to be an extension or a refinement of what we already know now. And that was a huge dawning for me. Science explains how everything works. Except how everything's work how things work, how a cold makes your nose run, how a mutation turns to cancer, turns to killing a loved one. That's good to know, but it's not enough. Human beings need to know why. Why do people exist? More specifically, why do I exist? I want to have a purpose in life. I want the universe to have a meaning. I want that. And with the foundation of believing there is no meaning or purpose in the universe, that means if I decide on a meaning and purpose of the universe, then that's it. That's as true as anything external to myself. And I came to believe that it doesn't matter whether something is told to you and you believe it. Someone says, this is out there and this is true, or it's something that I invent and project out there to believe, well, that actually is true. Or it actually is true. There actually is a God. There actually is a personal deity looking at us and caring for us. All those things are equivalent. If I believe it, or if it's really true in the materialist viewpoint, that's the same thing. Now that's a whole other set of sermons. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but my point is, meaning matters. Purpose matters. Human beings have to have it. Human beings can't be happy without it. So that's where I was when I got this email from Father Simon Hendry. He emailed me at work. I don't know, I had never met the man. He works at the university where I work. I don't know how he got my name, but he sent me an email inviting me to do the spiritual exercises. Part of his email said, doing this would allow you to experience for yourself the spirituality that is the heart of the Jesuit vision. It is an excellent way to deepen your prayer life and relationship with God and to become more aware of the ways that God is active in your life. Well, that terminology is not exactly what I would immediately respond to, but I want to have an open mind. I want to develop my meaning of what life is about. And I want to expose myself to all the ideas I can get my hands on. That's what science does. And see which ones work. So I responded to him, and this was the first time I had told anyone at the university that I was not even Catholic, that I was an atheist. I wrote, I'm not a religious person. In fact, I'm an atheist. I read that the retreat is focused on prayer and on God's role in one's life. I see these things as potentially meaningful symbols of something else. Would the retreat be a good idea for me? Father Hendry wrote back, Hi John, thanks for your interest and your honesty. Why don't we get together soon and talk about whether it would be meaningful for you or not? Do you have any free time early next week? Well, I was eager to talk to this guy. I had come to believe all the priests and the Sisters of Mercy, who also sponsor the university down there now, to be extremely intelligent, open-minded, thoughtful people. So I was looking forward to talking to him. So I met with Father Sai. We met privately in the Jesuit residence, and I told him I was in the mood to be extremely open and honest. And I told him, number one, I was uncomfortable with God talk. God talk and Jesus talk and praise and serve and save. I kind of tense up at that stuff. I associate that with things I don't agree with. All this talk about Jesus' blood washing stuff, and no, that's not really for me. And other stuff that I don't even understand. I never understood the idea that someone could die for your sins. That's not something that doesn't make sense to me. I told him that. I also told him I don't think the Bible is literally true. Symbolically, maybe. Literally, rarely. And I said I thought the reliability of the Bible, with all its translations of stories that have been handed down through untold generations, through different cultures and different languages, didn't meet the method of scientific validity. I also told him the most important thing about my resistance, my brick wall when it comes to religion. And that's the brick wall in the picture. And that is the bald-faced hypocrisy of religious people that I have witnessed my entire life. Christians who put under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, but then they accept or defend the segregation of schools. Greedy Christians, Christians who start wars, Christians who drop the atomic bomb twice in 3 days, Christians who go on TV and persuade lonely people to send in money, Christians who hate gay people, Christians who are racists, educated, intelligent Christians who turn off their brains when it comes to something that's in the Bible. I laid it all out. I didn't hold anything back. At the end of my litany, Father Sai said this: 90% of what you just said, I agree with. Some loose mortar fell from my brick wall at that moment. So I chose to do the exercises. Number one, I was curious, and I wanted to practice having an open mind. I wanted to see if there were any areas in this tradition that overlapped anything that meant something to me. And I hope the retreat helped me build or discover the meaning and purpose of existence. I just want to read a little bit of an ancient Indian text to you. This is the Rig Veda Hymn of Creation. It starts out like this: In the beginning, there was neither existence nor non-existence. I'll just leave it there. It goes on. It's a great hymn. But my point is that there doesn't have to be anything. There doesn't have to be chaos. There doesn't have to be any perceptible thing at all. But there is. And that's interesting. Why? That's kind of the basis of my spiritual quest. Why is there anything at all? When Moses was talking to the burning bush, and he said, okay, well, I'll go and do what you say. We'll free the slaves. But what am I going to tell them your name is? And God says, my name is I am, my favorite translation anyways, is God tells his name as I am that I am. To me, that means I am that anything exists. That's it. What more do you need? Anyhow, I'll get off on that topic. So, the retreat begins. The retreat went for 30 weeks. It's originally designed as a 30-day retreat where you would go to a place, and just every day you would be in meditation and thought, and you wouldn't do anything else except focus on the retreat for 30 days. But for regular people who can't do that, St. Ignatius suggested you could do it over 30 weeks. And so this corresponded both to the academic year at the university and to the liturgical year of the Catholic calendar. So we started last fall, just about 1 year ago almost exactly 1 year ago. And I would meet with Father Sai and 7 other retreatants on Fridays. When I was meeting in that group, I was the only person who wasn't a cradle Catholic. Everyone else had been born, baptized, and raised Catholic all the way. So I was the only person not doing the sign of the cross, and I didn't know all the little things that you're supposed to do. But they were very cool about it. And then on Monday mornings, I would meet with Father Sai, privately and talk about things that I was thinking about. And it was really an amazing experience. The group meetings really became like a support group. It was impressive how deep and personal people ended up getting in those sessions. Because we were all focused on the various topics I'll survey briefly. And what impressed me a lot was all these cradle Catholics were having pretty much the same experience I was having. Many of them said, I grew up in Catholic school and everything, and this is not what I learned. So we'll get into what it was that we learned. The purpose of the spiritual exercises is to help people learn to make decisions. And the exercises break down into 5 parts. The first part is called the principle and foundation. And then after that, you have what are called 4 weeks based on that 30-day format, but they're really just 4 phases that I'll mention to you. The principle and foundation is based on about a half page of text that Ignatius wrote that starts like this. Human beings are created to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord. The purpose of life is therefore to praise, reverence, and serve God, and by this means to save our soul. Okay, as an atheist, that was kind of a jagged morsel. I didn't swallow that so well. I learned right away that if I was going to get anything out of this, I had to do some vocabulary substitution. And I found this was surprisingly meaningful. Instead of God, I would put in words like existence, the universe, or the meaning of life. Instead of soul, I would put one's self with a capital S, or one's connection to the unity of all things. Because even an atheist or materialist knows that everything is all one thing. I mean, we're all one existence. We're not separate. We all came out of one point, and so that much, you don't need religion to agree to that. And the connection to that is meaningful. So I didn't see any conflict between my substitutions and the Catholic terminology. Doing that, I would come up with something like, instead of Ignatius's version of the principle and foundation, the sentences I read you, that can kind of be interpreted as something like, human beings have a purpose, which is to appreciate and love the universe around them and to become aware of a meaning in existence, so they can align themselves with that meaning in order that they can experience a deep happiness. And as I went on, I got better at this, and I really started to find that there are some, beneath the words, there really were some universal ideas that I found quite acceptable and even very attractive. In the interest of time, I've got to decide how much I'm going to give you here. This was very interesting to me, because this was something that all the Catholics in the room agreed was different from what they learned growing up. Father Sai gave us this. as one of the graces of the Principle and Foundation. He wrote, "This is the fundamental Christian grace, the experience of being loved by God. Without that experience, without some belief in that, without some realization of it, one's Christian life is going to go astray. Our life will become this frantic attempt to win God's love. We don't have to do that. We don't have to win God's love. We are loved by God unconditionally from the moment of our conception. Now, we can say that in our heads, but do we believe it in our hearts?" And in Father Sai's experience, he found that very few people actually believe that. So how does an atheist use this? First of all, that idea of you're created by God out of love, and you are loved unconditionally, is something different from what I had always assumed was what Catholicism was about. There seemed to be more about original sin, born with sin, earning God's love. And I heard a number of Jesuits over the years talk about this dichotomy. But for all my confidence in my atheism, there's no denying that imagining a sense of an external entity showering me with unconditional love feels great. It is empowering. And as someone who's often struggled with low self-esteem, I benefited from the idea that I am loved exactly as I am. Not because I'm polite, not because I'm smart or successful or well off or handsome, all of which I am, of course. But even if I weren't, I'm loved just because I am, just because I'm me. I was made the way I was supposed to be. And I think a lot of people have a lot of unhappiness in their life because they don't believe that. They're focusing on the shoulds, what they need to do to be okay. And this addresses that directly. So, God loves us completely. We are exactly the way we're supposed to be. We're right with the universe. And I ask you, does it matter if this loving God is a projection of my own mind? Make no mistake, being an atheist is not the same as wanting to be an atheist. I do want there to be meaning and purpose and unity in the universe. And that's what I like to think of as God, and I want it to be true. I was actually kind of afraid of going into this process because I felt like I was kind of jumping into spiritual waters where I didn't know if I'd be able to maintain my atheist integrity, if I would be washed away on, romantic song of love. What's wrong with that, I guess, is the question. Does it have to be real if it makes me a happier, more generous, more loving person, more the person I was meant to be by whatever that means? So anyhow, I got to go through the 4 weeks. There's so much stuff in here. I wish I could tell you all of it. The first week is about sin. And here's another one that was interesting because it addressed a lot of my assumptions of what religion is, and Catholicism in particular is. And it surprised me because when I was meeting with Father Sai, he said, "Okay, what do you think? We're in this week on sin and that there's sin in the world. How does that strike you?" I said, "Yeah, duh. As much as I know I should avoid it, I have seen the news. The world is full of sin. I'm sick to death of hearing about the injustice, the cruelty, the neglect, the unhappiness, the hypocrisy. I can barely stand it." And he pointed out to me that, yeah, that's sin, but that's probably not the most common kind of sin. Sin includes Well, in St. Ignatius's terms, sin is anything that separates you from your, quote, human nature. Your human nature being that you are a part of God, loved by God, and should serve God. That you're good. And so a big part of sin is unforgiveness and unacceptance of ourselves, and a lack of gratitude for existing, of being unhappy about our lives instead of realizing, I live! Wow! I exist! That's a whole different idea of sin for me. He wrote, or rather Father Sai wrote, the first week is not about sin alone. There is no such thing as sin alone. Sin is derivative of God's invitation to loving union, of being one with the universe. I'm putting in my own brackets here. Love is more original than sin. Let's speak of original love that works itself out as a most profound mercy because that original love is rejected. We don't think we're worthy of God, but we are. We're talking about sin that is a refusal of union with God in favor of oneself. And that struck me as similar to something the psychologist Jung would say, which could be said as favoring, or rather rejecting, where is it here? A refusal of the self, capital S self, your highest self, in favor of the ego. Okay, I got to go into the second week. The second week is about getting to know Jesus. And here we are reading closely through the Gospels. And I'd never read the Bible so closely. The only way I was able to do that was to stop being a hypocrite. Because I criticize people who take the Bible literally. And yet, what I rejected about the Bible was that it couldn't be literally true. So to drop that hypocrisy, I had to take the Bible and say, you know what? I tell everyone else this is a book of poetry and of symbols. Okay, I'm going to have to read it that way. Again, this felt to me like looking behind the brick wall. The brick wall was my rejection of all the things I didn't like about religion. And now, again with my vocabulary substitution, I was able to get some real meaning out of this stuff. You know, looking at the life of Jesus, I didn't dwell on, there's no way someone could heal that many people. You don't just touch someone and they get their sight. Or, what, fishes and loaves, that's impossible. Yes, it is, literally. But symbolically, what does that mean? And it was very interesting to me to realize for the first time, everything that Jesus did was to help others. Everything he did was to express a love of others. Always, constantly, to his own detriment. So the idea behind the second week of getting to know Jesus is realizing what a nice guy Jesus was, at least. How do you respond to that? You're created by God, you're completely loved. Jesus is an exemplar on earth of that love, showing it in human terms what it means. How do you respond to that? That's what the second week is about. God, I would love to go on and on about it, but in the interest of time. I'd like to point this out. This was like reading the Gospels for the first time. And I found out that Jesus has a great sense of humor. There's a few places in there where he's obviously like doing a stand-up routine. Just the format of things. I won't go into it, but it's pretty clear to me. I also found that he was sometimes tired of playing his role. and that he changed his mind on at least one occasion. He was human. He was amazingly committed to his ideals despite real danger and real fear. For most of the Gospels, Jesus is on the run. He's hiding out. He's teaching people when he can, and then he's trying to escape the authorities. He could have just not done it. Had a nice life as a carpenter. It's an impressive story. And I'll put in here that does it matter if Jesus was God on earth or just a man who taught some really great things, or a legend, a fiction made up to express a set of teachings? Does it really matter? Because the teachings do matter. I don't think there's anybody in here who would disagree that with some of the things that Jesus had to say meant a lot. This is the guy who said, it's not good enough to love your friends. You've got to love your enemies. If you don't think that's completely radical, I don't think you're thinking about it enough. That's worth thinking about a lot. Anyhow, the third week of the spiritual exercises is about the passion of Christ. You know, when Mel Gibson came out with his movie, I thought that was ridiculous. During my time in the spiritual exercises, confronting the agony of Jesus and deciding not to run away from those who were coming to kill him, to execute him. His refusal under torture to give in to his accusers. His suffering being abandoned by even his closest friends. And finally, his brutalization, public humiliation, and horrifying execution. Okay, I cried in Avatar. There is no Pandora. It doesn't matter if there was a Jesus. This story means something. It means a lot. It might mean everything for a human being. Suffice it to say, you know, in the second week, I had really gotten to love this guy, this character, this man, whatever you want to call him. And suffice it to say, this third week wasn't the breeziest phase of the spiritual exercises. It was extremely hard. And here's the hardest part about it. It confirmed for me all my darkest, ugliest views of humanity. The system, the Romans, the temple that, combined to execute Jesus. The power system, it always wins. They killed him. They put him up on a cross and killed him. The worldly system of injustice and greed always snuffs out the kind and the beautiful and the true. Lies defeat truth. Fear defeats love. Bad things happen to good people. That's where I was. I told Father Sy this. It's not the Romans and the priests in the Sanhedrin that upsets me so much about this. It's today. It's the injustice today, the cruelty today, the insanity today. This just confirms it. Here's Jesus, bringer of love, the truth, murdered. The system always wins. That's what I told Father Si. I don't like it. Father Si, listen to me in deep sympathy. I'm crying now. You should have seen me then. I was a mess. I looked up to him through tears for his response. And he said, "Look closer." Here's a sermon or a million right here. In a nutshell, no one knows what was going through Jesus' head as he stood there with all these hypocrites in power arranged around him. People who steal the property of widows for their own enrichment, ridiculing him, literally beating him because of his message. He didn't say a whole lot. He didn't try to get away from it. He didn't resist it. He knew it was coming. He knew for a long time it had been coming. He told all his friends this is going to happen. He didn't try to save himself. They could not make him for one instant let go of his truth, his self, his meaning, his purpose. Even as they crucified the guy, which is an execution specifically designed for spectacular pain and humiliation. And they put mocking decorations on him, a crown and a sign. They stab him in his ribs. And even as they drive spikes through his hands, who of us wouldn't say, expletive deleted? Who wouldn't have been cursing these people? What did Jesus say? Father, forgive them. Now, I don't care if this is just a story. That's amazing. That's the ultimate commitment to love. Jesus won that. Everybody dies. Everybody's got to die somehow. This is the way he died. He went all the way. If he had died peacefully, we never would have known the depth of love that someone can have. No matter what evil the world did to him, he forgave it all. Nothing could divert this man from loving the world. He won because he stayed true to himself no matter what. He stayed true to himself no matter what. Now, we don't all have to be nailed to trees. We've all got situations in our lives that pull us one way or another away from being true from ourselves. Here's the ultimate example of staying true. Fourth week of the spiritual exercises are about the resurrection. I told Father Si flat out, nah, I don't believe in the resurrection. No, don't buy it. One of the big ones I don't buy. But the point of the fourth week of the exercises is, according to Father Si, is it leads people into a contemplation of Christ's risen and consoling presence in our individual lives and in our world. So, whereas I don't believe this guy actually rose from the dead, his example, true, fictional, whatever, is an extremely consoling presence to me. It is an example I want to follow in my life. I don't want to die on a cross, but I want to be true to what I think is right, no matter what. That's really important. The Roman Empire and the Sanhedrin are long gone. In fact, they kind of ate each other away. But Jesus' words are still cherished worldwide. His values are as strong now as ever, as hidden behind that ugly brick wall as they may be. I think that says something. So, I need to wrap up. In my most atheist, materialist outlook, cosmic meaning and purpose are even more important without a God. That's because it means we must create our own meaning and purpose. So that leaves us each with the job back in kind of square one. We all have to determine what meaning and purpose are in the universe and in ourselves. I believe these things have a lot to do with the unity of all the cosmos and with love. I found these themes in the spiritual exercises, and I found them much exemplified in the life and teaching of Jesus. I don't think Jesus addressed everything I want to know. He didn't tell me how to deal with kids. It's a big issue. There's a lot of questions there. Love kind of addresses a lot of that, though, I think. The example of God's love for us, I think, is a symbol of how we might want to treat our kids and everyone else for that matter. So I'll end with this. There's so much more I could have gone off about, but the bricks in my brick wall were my negative reactions to religion. The nonsense, but most of all, the hypocrisy. And those bricks are definitely still there. They haven't dissolved. They're rock solid. I still can't stand those things. But what changed is that I looked behind that brick wall and actually found some beautiful and important things. Deeply meaningful things. Useful things. Things I wish I had known all my life. So those bricks of disgust and indignation no longer form a wall between me and meaningful things. There's no getting rid of them, and I wouldn't want to. But rather now those bricks form a scrap heap, a junk pile off in the corner of the backyard, behind some weeds, where I don't have to look at it too often. When I find one more, I'm just going to toss it over there. I'm not going to build another wall. Because that way, the bricks don't get in the way of me finding things that make my life richer, more meaningful, and more happy. Okay, we have a hymn to help wrap things up. Number 86. Blessed Spirit of my life. Oh, thank you.
gratitude and then join us downstairs for coffee and bagels and conversation.